operations located in Perth, and I'll be chairing the meeting today. So just a little bit of housekeeping before we start. Just be aware of competition law and meeting protocol. I think this is a standard template that we've used before. Have a look through that as well. And so to kick off, we acknowledge the traditional owners of country throughout Australia and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and cultures, who pay respect to elders past and present. So thank you very much. Just a little bit more housekeeping. Just keep on mute if you can, if you're not asking a question. If you are asking a question, just pop on camera so we can see you are, or drop it in the chat and we will get to it in the Q&A as well. Certainly, we're going to be recording the forum too, and we publish that on our website. And post-forum, any feedback is greatly appreciated so you can make these sessions more productive and useful for everybody who attends. Okay, so this is today's agenda. I've actually got quite a lot to go through. I'll give a little bit of introduction. I'll hand over to Kate to give an update on the final second in-period submission, determination, and a number of other updates thereafter. So I might as well just kick in straight into it. We do have time for other business at the end of the session, and I understand that there's one item that one of the market participants wishes to raise related to the NCAS prices. So we'll cover that in other business. I think there should be plenty of time for that as well. Okay, so with that, I just first to confirm that everybody's happy from the minutes from the last WACF. If there's any comments, please yell out. Otherwise, we'll take them approved. On to the next item. Okay, so nobody see anything. That's fine. Okay, fantastic. Look, just a bit of an update. It was sort of became quite apparent that that there's been a few shifts in the WA department over the last 6 months, and I thought it'd just be worthwhile to give a bit of an update on who's holding the new positions. Now we've sort of settled it down to going forward. So here's the current leadership. We all report up to Kate Ryan. We have Amy Tate, who's the Group Manager for Market Development and Energy Procurement. So she's a new starter, so welcome, Amy. Myself in the WA Operations role. We have Katie McKenzie, who's the Group Manager for WA System Design and Transformation. So she's on camera, so welcome, Katie. Andrew Smith, who everybody should be aware of from the WEM Reform Program, has now taken up the position as Program Director at WA Reform Program. And Robin Parsons, who was our old WA Stakeholder Engagement Manager, has moved to another role in the NEM. And we welcome Christina Madsen, who's Acting Manager in that position as well. And finally, there's Jean Sharafi, who's come back from a wonderful leave in Europe, and is taking the role of Strategic Advisor Energy Transition. So that's the current leadership in WA. So please feel free to reach out to any of us. Okay, so with that, I will pass it across to Kate Ryan, and she can give an update on WA budgets and fees. So welcome, Kate, and over to you.
Thanks very much, Martin. Hi all, thanks for joining this morning. I just wanted to give a pretty brief update on the budgets and fees as we head into it. In fact, we've already started FY 25. So just to really circle back on something that we've raised in previous forums, as many of you would be aware, we made a second in-period submission to the Economic Regulation Authority in relation to our allowable revenue and forecast capital expenditure for this allowable revenue 6 period that we're currently in. FY 25 is the last year of the 3-year allowable revenue 6 period. And so we, using the process in the rules, sought some additional funding from the ERA, and the ERA published its final determination on Friday as part of that process. Also on Friday, we published then the budget and fees for FY 25. So market participants can find their fees, GSI and WEM fees, now on the AEMO website, and that of course includes the not just the AEMO market fees, but of course the regulator fees and the coordinator fees as well. So they're now all available as we head into the new financial year. The WEM fees, you can see there, really wanted to just kind of pause and acknowledge that it is a very significant increase in fees from the FY 24 fee level, and that probably reflects a number of things which were all kind of canvassed in our in-period submission and the associated determinations. But really, the flow through now of the depreciation and amortisation from the WEM reform program, which of course has had a lot of effort put into it over the last few years. That's now flowing through in fees with a bit of catch up in FY 25, just because of the timing of the regulatory cycles. Like the rest of you, of course, AEMO is facing cost pressures, a higher inflationary environment, a higher cost and wage environment than we saw at the start of the allowable revenue 6 period. But probably most significantly is really that when our initial allowable revenue 6 was set back in 2022, we had a good line of sight to the WEM reform program. And while we knew there were further reforms to come beyond that, they were not well defined at that point in time. And so what we had seen then is sort of the first 2 years of our period, we were sort of funded at more or less our current level, but that sort of fell off for the last year. And so this was the process really for us to kind of effectively maintain the core capability that we've got as we continue with the work, not just to kind of operate today's systems and markets, but importantly to enable the energy transition. So kind of contributing to ongoing reform, accommodating some increases in our functions that have occurred over the period, as well as some activities that AEMO needs to do as the system operator to work out the engineering of the power system of the future. They're the things that have really driven what is, we acknowledge, a very significant increase in fees. And so I'm not going to kind of respond specifically to stakeholder submissions, of which there were a handful through that process, except to say thank you to those who did engage in the process. And we have absolutely read and reflected on the feedback that's come through, both formally through submissions to the ERA, but also through other channels, directly or indirectly to AEMO. So we are obviously reflecting on that and very much acknowledge this is an unwelcome fee increase in a higher cost environment. But the thing I just wanted to point you to is that we are kind of in response to that feedback and other kind of drivers, looking at how we can engage with you better in future budget setting processes. And so I'm not going to go through these in detail, but they're things you'll hear more and more about over time. In fact, you'll just see it happen, which is probably better. Is that as we head into the annual budget cycle in future years, we'll be doing some quite deliberate stakeholder engagement early in that process before we're setting our fees, to really get your input, provide transparency as early as possible, and try and signal as best we can directionally where fees might be going. Our expectation is that they are now stabilising, barring anything kind of unexpected or additional in the forward agenda. We are also working with Energy Policy WA and hopefully going to talk to this at the next Market Advisory Committee meeting. But talking to Energy Policy WA about how we get a better look at the implementation costs of reforms earlier in the reform agenda. That's that middle purple box at the bottom there. Because we acknowledge that sometimes it's not until we start to talk about our fees that participants get a sense of the cost of some of these reforms. And that's probably happening a bit too late in the piece. So we are working on how we can bring that conversation earlier in the piece and also have a conversation with our stakeholders about things like sequencing and timing of activities to see how we can do that in a sustainable way, but also in the most cost-effective way. And as many of you would also be aware, we are preparing a proposal to amend the allowable revenue framework, which we're certainly finding is difficult to work with within this rapid change environment. Also finding it's quite high cost because we have to go through these regulatory steps now quite often. So that's a process which will go through pretty extensive stakeholder consultation over the rest of the year. And if that is something you're interested in engaging directly with us on as we're kind of preparing the proposal, please do reach out either to myself or Katie McKenzie, and we'd really welcome your input. So really just wanted to, I guess, circle back on that and flag that there is a bit of further activity in this space. But thank you very much to those who participated, and participants, if you need to, jump online and you can now see budgets and fees for the coming year. Thanks, Martin.
All right. So I guess, yeah, thank you very much, Kate. Any questions in relation to this? I don't see anybody's hand up or any messages in the chat. But if you have questions, there's certainly time later on in the session. So thank you very much, Kate. All right. Okay. So now we will pass on to a power system update, and we'll give a Michael Dalton, hopefully he's online. He's going to give us an overview of some of the tight operating conditions that we've had over the last 3 months. So over to yourself, Michael.
Thanks, Kate. Thanks, Martin. Can you hear me?
Yep, loud and clear. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, I'll give a bit of an update of the power system, what's been going on in the last month, some of the challenging conditions, and the outlook for the rest of winter. Um, if you get market advisories, you'll probably would have noticed that at the start of this month, we had a pretty tight operating condition from the 7th to the 13th of June. We issued 4 low reserve condition notices. That was due to a few conditions. There was a bunch of planned and forced outages in, and essentially that resulted in what we see here is our dispatchable level of generation was hitting the level of reserves that were required to run the power system securely and reliably. And it was a mix of one of our largest coal units being out for a big piece of work that's bringing on new generation in the Collie region. We had a lot of low wind days, especially at peak, which I'll show you in a moment. And we were able to run through these days. I think we engaged with a couple of market participants to shorten their outages when we were heading into these days where you see the red line crossing into the purple there. This is a pretty generic photo of a construction site, but this is one of the big battery projects that's happening in the Collie region. There's 2 batteries coming on there. There's the Neoe BESS and the Synergy Collie BESS. Quite significant projects for the Swiss. It's the second and third big battery that we're connecting, really moving towards that renewable energy target and helping to support the network and bring on new capacity to ensure that we can manage with the retirement of the coal facilities that's coming up in the pipeline. To touch on the wind variation, I think during the times, so that tight load week, we've got around about 1,100 megawatts of installed wind capacity in the Swiss. You can see that on these days, the total wind output at peak, so peak is usually centered around 6 p.m. in winter. On the 4th, we had 4 megawatts total. So that's from every single wind farm across the 2,000 kilometers of geographic land that the Swiss has. On the 12th, we had 48 and then 25 megawatts. So with that, if we go back to this chart, we really come down to what we would do our planning on, which is firmed sort of gas, coal, diesel generation that we can reliably factor into any of our sort of power system real-time decisions and our forward planning decisions. On the flip side, only, wait there, hold on. This date's wrong, sorry. What date is that? 21st and the 30th. That should be the 21st of the 6th, sorry. On the flip side, we also saw some records. So the 30th of April, we saw the record of 1,042 megawatts. So pretty much every single wind turbine was hitting their max. And similarly on the 21st, not the 13th, we came very close to beating that record again, or getting pretty much the most out of our wind fleet. So this is what we'd like to have all the time, but sometimes we don't. We don't really plan for 1,000 megawatts of wind, but it's always good when we can get this much wind resource out of the fleet. Another interesting thing we've seen, it's probably the second or third time we've actually seen it in real-time ops, is the morning peak being higher than the evening peak. So the evening peaks typically, 99% of the time, it's always going to be higher than the morning peak, but we saw the morning peak on the 20th of the 6th come ahead around about 10 megawatts higher than the evening peak. So it's not something we can't manage, but it's just a bit of an interesting outcome of I guess winter and people turning on their heaters in the morning. Yeah, so it's, I don't know, you call it a camel curve or something like that, but it's yeah, just one of the interesting things we're dealing with in winter now. We're seeing it happen more often, and it's only a couple of days in the year, but it's probably a trend that might happen more often. So leading into winter, we do a fair bit of planning around how we're going to manage the power system for the weather conditions that are provided to us from the BOM and other weather providers. So I'll just touch on this today. The BOM's indicated that for this winter, we have a warmer than usual winter, similar to last year actually, where we're seeing higher lows. So the chance of it being unusually cold is less. So that does lead to less stress on the power systems. So if there's less cold snaps, then we don't expect to have as many high load winter days, which is, I guess, a bit of a boon for the system. But there's still the chance of a cold snap coming through where we will hit some of those higher loads, which reach around about 3,800 megawatts. I think it was the record last year. And for rainfall, there's going to be the typical amount of rain. So not expected to get much more, not expected to get much less. This is just another look at the temperature and the rainfall. So there's a low chance of unusually cold conditions across the country in general. So I don't know if you've seen in the news, there's a pretty bad snow season this year. It's due to these warmer winter days, and again, we're not expecting any unusual rain patterns to hit the Swiss. So hopefully no big storms that take any of the network down. The BOM also gives us an outlook on the wind. So going back to the previous slides, I guess this period here is the start of winter, so it's the 1st to the 30th of June. There was a forecast of it being below medium wind speeds, which we have been observing. So we are getting periods of very low wind, but on the flip side, we do get the occasional days where we're hitting our maximum. Across the season, so from June through to August, we've got just the typical wind patterns. So again, it's a spread. So we will see some high wind days and some low wind days, but we usually plan, if we're doing forward planning, we will plan for the lower case because it's probably not very prudent to approve a bunch of network outages or generation outages based on low wind forecasts. Electrical system readiness. This will be a look at the amount of generation we've got versus the amount of load we're forecasting. So this line here is the forecasted load for the month, for the season. So this is the winter outlook. This part on top is what we call the planning margin. It's a buffer there to cater for any loss of a large generator or a network line or equipment that may take out access to some of the generation in the Swiss. It's looking pretty healthy this year. We've had worse winters come through. This chart shows you pretty much what the reserve margin is. So the blue above 0 is good, but there are some regions here where we've got a couple of generation outages planned that may need to move, but we firm these numbers up the closer it gets to the actual start of any outages that may cause us to run tight and potentially go into any LOR 1, 2, or 3 days. Also, we're expecting some commissioning to happen on, I think, one of the BESSs to come through in around August. So that's not included yet because those timeframes tend to slip. I think the project teams tried to do their best, but we don't count any reserves in our outlooks until we get commissioning starting. So these numbers around here are most likely to pump up when the batteries come on, so we can start to include those in our reserve margin calculations. I think that is it from me. So if anyone's got any questions, pop them up. I think there's something in the chat. Paul?
Yeah, morning, Michael. Morning, everyone. Just a quick question. That last page you had up, does that factor in requested outages or approved outages?
These are all approved outages. So any requested outages come through, we will look at what reserves we've got, what we can do in terms of maybe asking other market participants to reschedule, which is pretty challenging, as you know, Swanee. But this is what we'll use to make those decisions. So depending on what type of outage it is and the criticality it has to the Swiss, so if it's a really important unit that we want to get ready for winter or summer, or there's some major maintenance that comes through, we'll try our best to find a spot that's best for the system and best for the market participant. And like our planning team works pretty much daily with market participants to try and find spots for them. But yeah, this will not include any unplanned outages or unapproved or awaiting assessment.
Yeah, okay. All right. Thanks very much, Matt.
Thanks, Paul.
Okay, there's a couple of questions in the chat, Michael. So there's a question from Patrick, which I think Dean Sharafy's already answered, which was related to 5-year cyclical patterns of wind, and which is something that we're monitoring. So thanks for answering that one, Dean. There was a question from Wayne Trumbull, who asked, how has forecast wind production compared to actual over time, and what has the effect on the need for regulation contingency ESS services in under or over the requirement? Not sure if you can answer
right.
that.
So so for wind forecast production, we take a very low wind forecast. So if Wayne, so if you're looking at an outlook, we can schedule outages out to 3 years. So because we see days of almost zero wind production over the year, we take a pretty low wind forecast into our reserves. We do include some, and we are looking at ways or newer ways to factor in the amount of wind that we've got. But due to the fact that we do see what they call a wind drought, or multiple days during the year where there's zero wind, it's very hard to put an outage in that would compromise our ability to manage power system security and reliability. In regards to the effect of the need for regulation and contingency services, the way that we would procure those, it's more related around clouds and DPV forecasts. So if we're seeing a very volatile day, that would increase the need for ESS. So we would make a decision based on information that we have, and it's mostly real-time information, to change the quantity of ESS required through the day. That would be to manage pretty big swings. So we have seen days where we pick up almost 700 megawatts of load in about half an hour. There's been a couple of examples of that. So being risk averse and not wanting to breach the technical thresholds that we're supposed to run the the Swiss to, we will elect to increase some ESS services in those cases. What else have we got? I've heard that NEM experience low wind year every 5 years. Who knows? Patrick. Yep. Sorry, you've been. Thanks. Thanks, Dean. Okay, anything else?
No, I think that's the last of the questions, Michael. So, all right. Well, thank you very much for that overview, and we'll move to the next item then.
Cool. Thank you.
No problems. Okay, so we've got a short presentation of the SCADA migration project that Western Power's running, and we've invited Rudy to give us an update. So, over yourself, Rudy.
Thank you, Martin. Morning, everyone. So my name is Rudy Barker. I'm the Operational Systems Manager in Network Operations here at Western Power. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the SCADA migration, what we're doing and why we're doing it. And following my slides, Paul Elliott will step in and cover off how that will potentially impact on the market participants. All right, so first of all, a little bit about Western Power. So this is a mandatory slide for all external presentations, telling you a little bit about Western Power, who we are and what we do. So we run the distribution transmission networks in the southwest of Western Australia. And our grid covers 255,000 square kilometres, and there's some information there which I'm not going to read to you, which covers off how big we are, what we do, and a little bit of an idea of the scope of the network that we're running. So let's have a look at the core operational systems that we use in network operations to run the network. So network operations is the part of Western Power that runs distribution and transmission 24 hours a day. And we have two primary systems at the moment that we use to do that. We've got one called Power and Advantage, which we're using to run distribution, and another one called XA21, which we're using to run transmission. These are both GE products. And XA21 is a system which is no longer being supported by GE in Australia. In fact, we're the only utility in the southern hemisphere who is still running this system. It isn't being developed further. It's at end of life. It's out of support, and we have an imperative to move off that system. So a decision we've made is to move everything onto Power and Advantage and have a single system for all of distribution and transmission, which has a huge number of benefits for us as a business. And the SCADA migration is one of the projects to achieve exactly that. So the SCADA migration impacts on this bit here that I've just circled in red. It's the connections between the transmission network in the field and the transmission SCADA running in XA21. So let's have a look at where we're going to. This is our future state, and the SCADA migration will take us some of the way towards achieving this. So I've circled again, the SCADA migration impacts on this component. So we'll be taking all of the transmission network out of XA21 and connecting it into Power and Advantage instead. And as I said earlier, that gives us a single system to run and manage our entire network from top to bottom. And our connection to AEMO will then be from Power and Advantage directly to them through an ICCP link. Now, off to the side, there is a AEMS, which is actually an eTerra system, a very cut-down version of eTerra, similar to what AEMO run across Australia. We're just using it for certain services that we need to run transmission that we can't get at the moment in Power and Advantage, which is state estimation, contingency analysis, and load flow. So let's get back on the SCADA migration. What does that actually look like? So I'll just show you how we're going to progress with that. Each of the components will be done in a tranche. There's 4 tranches, and this is what each tranche will look like. They actually run over a 14-day rotation. The bulk of the work is done within 10 days, and we've then got a 4-day gap before the next tranche begins. So we take a data cut from production. We then run a migration tool over it that generates a whole range of scripts. We then spend 3 days running a testing system called Catalon. Catalon does full point-to-point testing. It's provided by GE, and that will make sure that what we've extracted out of production is actually going to match what we want to have in the previous system, and that we're all good to go. We then preload the data on the Thursday, and then we cut over, and this is the part that's most relevant to the market participants. We'll be cutting over during each tranche on the day 8, day 9, and 10, which is Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And we'll do about 35 channels over those 3 days, so about 12 channels per day. So these are the timelines we're looking at. So 4 tranches, you can see that they're on a 2-week rotation. Day 1, is actually scheduled at the moment for the 19th of July. We're looking good at hitting that date, so this is coming up very quickly. And then we'll progress through tranche 1, tranche 2, tranche 3 and tranche 4. Should have it all done by the beginning of September is our plan, everything going well. And overall, we'll be cutting across 144 channels, which are covering 359 RTUs and substations over the 4 tranches. So a significant amount of work has gone into this, and we've been planning for this for years. So this is a culmination of a huge amount of work from a very big team. That's it for me. I'll hand over to Paul Elliott, who will talk about how this will impact on market participants, and I think then we can take some questions.
Thanks very much, Rudy. For those who don't know me, my name's Paul Elliott. I'm the Control Room Manager here for AEMO in the WEM. So obviously changing these channels is going to have an impact on participants. Effectively, we're moving the comms channel that they're connected to from, as Rudy showed, from the XA21 to the Power On Advantage. And of course, during that transition, that there'll be an interruption to the communication from AEMO through to those facilities out in the field. So we've worked with Western Power closely in terms of managing the timing of those and in terms of which tranche they're going to occur to minimise the impact that's going to have on the market. For example, we're working with Western Power so we don't do all the facilities that are providing ESS or for regulation at the same time. So we've been working with them through there. How's it going to impact the participants? So we'll send out a market advisory before each of the tranches, each of the 4 tranches, and this will be a high level market advisory just as a reminder to everyone that these are occurring. We will actually communicate on the day directly with participants, so that's the AEMO control room, that we're going to be migrating their comms channel that day with an indicative timing. Of course, that can move around depending on how the progresses are, but we'll give the indicative timing where we can. So we'll contact the participant of the expected impact, and because there's no signals that are going to be sent from the SCADA system, and that's via SCADA, the likely impacts will be semi-scheduled facilities constrained to a stable value, and that may be 0, and that's because we don't have any visibility or control at that moment in time. So if the wind increases or decreases, we wouldn't actually be able to see that and have the systems respond. The scheduled facilities will be constrained out of regulation. Of course, with regulation, we send the signals every 4 seconds, and if there's no method to send that through, then we're not going to be able to do that. It may be constrained out of contingency, and when we say may, it depends on the facility as to how their arrangements are made. So droop response for the facilities that provide that will be there, and so we're just working through exactly what that may look like. So we're not saying that you will be constrained out, we won't be saying that you won't, but of course when we discuss that in the morning, and it's likely that we'll communicate prior to that so that participants can get prepared for that. And we may be constrained facilities to their current set point for the duration of the cutover, again because we can't send SCADA signals. We're looking into the possibility that we may be able to get some calcs put into the XA21 from other devices in the field, which will allow us to send set points through the APIs and monitor those back. But again, that'll be on a facility by facility basis. But it may be that we need to constrain a facility for a current set point. The changes, the migration is expected to take up to an hour, so not a huge amount of time per channel. So we expect that it's going to be reasonably minimal impact on participants. Of course, there will be occurrences, and we're setting out the guidelines of when we may not be able to cut over a particular channel, depending on the what's happening in the power system, and we're working with Western Power to articulate those. So that's going to be the impact on participant. It's a really important project, as Rudy said. I've been working very closely with Western Power to ensure this goes off as well as we can expect it, and really appreciate the assistance of the participants when we get to cutting those channels over.
Great, thank you, Paul. There's actually a question for you from Paul Eris. Is there any flexibility in the timing for facility-specific migrations?
Thanks, Paul. Yes, we've been working with Western Power to work those through, and if there are any particular reasoning or requirements from the participants, we will be looking into, as part of that assessment that we've already done, when facilities normally operate, when those particular facilities are operating, if they're providing ESS or other services. And so we're actually been working through that. But if there's participants are interested further down the track as to the expectation of their facilities, more than welcome to reach out to us, and we can have a discussion.
Cool. Okay. Thank you very much, Paul. Okay. Are there any other questions on this particular topic? Otherwise, I'll move on to the ESU update. Okay. Excellent. Okay. Well, thank you very much for that, Paul and Rudy. It's a project that's been going on for a while, so it'll be good to see that actually completed later this year. Okay, so now I pass on to Toby Price, who's going to give us an overview of the WEM Electricity Statement of Opportunities. So over to you, Toby.
Thank you, Martin, and good morning, everyone. Yeah, we provided, well, firstly, we published the 2024 WEM Electricity Statement of Opportunities 2 weeks ago today, and we provided a pretty extensive update to industry last Monday. So this is a single slide overview, and really it's providing some context as I pass over to my colleague Nita Kapani to walk through our capacity market investment update. So this is a high-level overview of the ESU. We do encourage you to have a read of it. This year we've taken on some new rule obligations, which I think give us the opportunity to more clearly message risk into the future and identify some sort of underlying evolution of the power system, which I think is really interesting, and I think it sets us up really nicely for future ESUs to build on that work and really help us navigate the energy transition. So at a high level, we've separated the sort of key themes of the ESU. So to touch on consumption and demand, really we're seeing a relatively similar picture to last year's ESU. We're still seeing that strong growth in energy consumption and in demand. But I should say that underneath that, there's always lots of, sorry, Laura, I think you might have lost the slide. There's always lots of moving parts, and quite interestingly, whilst we're seeing that strong growth in consumption driven by decarbonisation, electrification, and the building of our sort of EV base, we are seeing some change in our distributed energy resources. So our small scale solar, particularly, we're forecasting to grow more strongly, which is driving minimum demands into negative territory from sort of 2027. And I won't go into the details, but there's some really interesting analysis of the role of the large scale storage that's entering the system and mitigating those minimum demand events. We have existing services to cover us from 2024 to 2026 to mitigate the risks that we identified in previous ESUs. But what we're seeing is that sort of changing picture as the various forces on our demand and consumption manifest. Turning to supply and investment, and I won't go into too much detail on the investment as I hand over, but we are seeing a much improved picture in terms of the capacity available to supply that consumption and demand. That is largely due to our efforts in procurement and seeing over 1 gigawatt of new capacity entering the system over the next couple of years. But what we're seeing at the back end of the decade, as we see the final coal facilities retiring, is that widening gap and the need for sustained investment in generation, storage, and demand side response, supported by transmission. So I think that picture is really a consistent view of consumption and demand, with that changing picture of supply as we take these steps to really making the transition happen. So that's it from me. Back to you, Martin.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much, Toby. Yeah. Okay. So hopefully people have had a chance to look through the ESU. It is quite a detailed read. And with that, I will pass across to Nitika, who will give us an update on the capacity market investment. So over to you, Nitika, who online at the moment.
Thanks, Martin,
Okay.
and thanks, Toby, for actually setting the scene for some of the capacity procurement processes that are underway in the WA Capacity Market Investment team. As you are aware, there are a few processes underway, and I'm going to quickly just cover off where we are at with these processes. The NCAS procurement process for reliability services for the 25-27 capacity years is finally coming to a close. AEMO is finalizing the last of the contract negotiations, so that would be a good one to wrap up very shortly. The CRC window for the 24 reserve capacity cycle closed last Monday, on the 24th of June, and I would like to thank market participants who did engage with the team in a timely manner, and I hope you found that engagement as part of the preliminary review process useful. But a few key dates that I would appreciate you being across as part of the CRC process. We are currently going through all of the applications. It is quite an intensive due diligence process that's currently underway. AEMO will advise each applicant of the CRC that they get assigned for their respective facilities on the 12th of August. Following which, and I have highlighted that date, that is the 25th of August. By the 25th of August, participants are required to undertake a few activities. One is to provide your reserve capacity security, which is applicable for new capacity, for any upgrades, and for DSPs. And participants are also required to complete the trade declaration process in the RCM portal. So that 25th of August date is critical for market participants. On the 27th of August, 2 days, a very tight time frame for us to turn things around, AEMO will publish the CRC assigned to each facility, following which we will undertake the network access quantity process. We will run the NAC model, and we will be publishing both the capacity credits and the NAC on the website on the 30th of September. In parallel, we are also preparing for the upcoming SRC process for the 24-25 hot season, the 1st of December 24, 1st of April 2025. And internally, there is quite a lot of work underway to determine the 24-25 SRC trigger quantity and basically forming a view on the likely capacity that's available for the hot season. We are, however, expecting to trigger the SRC process as soon as possible by the end of the month. I want to talk a little bit more on the SRC process and associated costs in the next slide. And just because it does come up and there's a lot of effort that goes on as part of the process, both from the participants' perspective and from AEMO's perspective, I think we can all agree that SRC has played a critical role in supporting reliability over the last 2 seasons. In 22-23, we procured 97 megawatts, and SRC was activated on 3 occasions with a total cost of $3.83 million. By comparison, in the previous summer, we procured 160 megawatts of SRC, and that was activated on 14 occasions, with a total estimated cost of $20.3 million. I do want to point out that ultimately the SRC costs are based on several variables, which include the amount procured, a mix of availability payments, and the number of activations during the relevant summer. And they also differ for each market participant. We can all acknowledge that this summer was exceptionally hot, and it resulted in 8 of the 9 highest demand records being set. And SRC was really critical in successfully keeping the lights on and the air conditioners running during unprecedented conditions. With the 2024 WEM issue out that highlighted a risk of supply shortfall for the 24-25 summer around 300 megawatts, AEMO is assessing currently the final SRC quantity, and that SRC quantity will consider several aspects like what are the major outages, what are the fuel disruptions that we need to consider, any facility delays, and other things. The aim is for, again, SRC, the SRC trigger and the tender procurement to commence as soon as possible. By the end of July is what we are aiming for. In the SRC space, AEMO is also supporting the Coordinator of Energy's 24 supplementary capacity review that is underway. Submissions are due on the 8th of July on the consultation paper and the rule draft amendments. The consultation paper and the amendments essentially aim to improve the information flows and the transparency, also improve the procurement process, the activation and the measurement of supplementary capacity services, and basically is everything that we would have expected to learn from the 23-24 SRC process, which the Coordinator of Energy has incorporated into these rule amendments with sufficient stakeholder feedback. Other matters that are keeping the team busy on the next slide is we are supporting the capacity investment scheme implementation in the WEM, and I'll be passing on to Dilan from AEMO Services in a little bit. But we've engaged quite a lot with participants in the month of July on CRC processes. I think that engagement will probably not be as much as it's been, because now we just need to take the information away and assess it. We've been involved with returning reserve capacity security returns for some of the facilities who have met the conditions and to be eligible for that return. And we are currently undertaking the reserve capacity test process. So the self-test period is still open. That concludes on the 31st of July. Post that date, AEMO will be subjecting facilities to a formal test if we do not see demonstration of that facility meeting the requirements of the RCM via their normal operations. I will leave it at that, and I will pass on to Dilan to provide us a bit of an overview of the CIS body of work. So, Dilan.
Thanks, Nitika. I'll quickly go through a bit of background information and some indicative timing for the first CIS tender in the WEM. In terms of background, this is the first CIS reverse auction that will run in the WEM. It's got a target of 500 megawatts of 4-hour equivalent dispatchable capacity, so that's around 2 gigawatt hours. Taking a small step back, broadly, you may know the CIS in sort of prior operation and tenders in the NEM. The objective of that policy is to incentivize the development and deployment of 32 gigawatts of renewable, variable renewable and clean dispatchable capacity across the entire country. In the WEM, broadly, they're targeting regular tenders held approximately every 12 months until 2027. So as I mentioned, the first CIS tender is targeting clean dispatchable capacity, and we're really looking for projects that are quite progressed in development and are able to reach COD no later than 1 October 2027. And we would reward or sort of consider of higher merit projects that are able to reach a COD earlier than that. We worked quite closely with Nitika's team on ensuring that the CIS tender is really tightly integrated with the RCM process as well. And there's a lot more information that we've released to the market last Friday, actually, and that's available on AEMO Services website. We're aiming to launch the tender in mid-July for timing purposes, with registrations closing a week before project bids are due in August. And then we have an assessment process that commences in September and October after that assessment process, we'll shortlist a select set of bidders for a financial value bid, and we will be looking to announce successful bidders the first quarter of next year. As I said before, there's a lot more information in the market brief, and tender guidelines, so the formal process document is intended to be released on the 16th of July, alongside the launch of the process. I'll stop there, and I think we're opening up questions next.
All right. Okay. It doesn't look like there's any questions for you. I did see a hand come up briefly. If that person wants to come off mute and ask a question, that's you're more than welcome. Otherwise, we'll move into other business.
Yeah, that was me. Just going back to the CRC, I noted that the security due date was 25th, whereas all previous publications had the 23rd being the due date. Has that changed, has it, Nikita?
It is still the 25th. I'm just pulling up I'm just going to post the timetable as well in on this chat box for everyone's information. So just give me a second. But yeah.
Yeah, it's just like in the workshops on that previously, the date was the 23rd of August.
Sorry, you are right. It is the 23rd of August. That is my bad.
No worries.
I will rectify that and I will pop in the link.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you very much for that. All right. Okay. So, well, thanks very much for the presenters. So we're just moving on to other business. Now, we did get a query just prior to the to this WACF expressing quite a lot of interest in the FCAS update. So in some previous WACFs, we actually had provided a little bit of a summary of where they were at, and we didn't do it this time because basically we didn't see a major shift in the current outcomes on that. So certainly it is something that we value transparency a lot, and it's actually got a lot of attention, and as such we've been publishing a lot of the very similar information in our last QED reports, because we actually see there's quite a lot of value in the broader transparency of what's happening in that particular market. Also, just in relation to that, all the associated data is actually on our public website as well. So if anybody's interested in actually pulling that, or you can't find it, please reach out to us and we'll point you into the right files to get that. The other thing is, it was good feedback that there's a lot of interest in that. So what we'll also do in the next WECF, we'll do a little bit more of a detail overview, because we'll have almost a year of data at that point. So they'll actually give us a little bit more insight. So thanks for the query on that one. As a little bit of a reminder as well, on the FCAS payments and providers, that's actually on our website as well, about who's accredited for that, and the payments that basically happen within the market, but not actually to those market participants. But there's quite a bit of information there. Now, saying that, during the last period, there was introduction of the $500 cap as well, and there isn't a huge amount of data at the moment to actually analyse that in a sort of longitudinal type of study, but we can see, if we do a bit of a comparison from the period just prior and just after, just about the month before and after the implementation of the cap, there actually has been a drop in the average prices. Depending on what interval and what's happening in the market, it's been between about $15 to $45 per megawatt hour. So there actually has been a reduction in prices from that implementation of that change. Now, there's also an ongoing investigation of FCAS prices, and if Dora's on the line, I'm sorry to put you on the spot. I'm not sure if you're available to give a bit of an update of where that's at. Otherwise, I'm happy to take any other questions. Yes, Dora. Okay. Welcome.
Hi,
Dora.
Martin. Apologies. As you just said, there is an ongoing investigation, and The first question about the administered cap, I get is whether we affirm in our minds that that will be automatically removed on the 20th of November. And as the rules stand, they're drafted in a way where the cap automatically will fall away. We don't need to do anything. It will just go back to the, in this case, $2,038 for each of the services. So yeah, the cap is falling away. So we've done some very intense work, obviously in collaboration with GRA and the AEMO, and we need them for various reasons. So we work collaboratively together to find out what's going on and why the prices have been, in some circumstances, sixfold for certain services since the start of this market. And our current focus is on 6 or 7 key issues that, in our view, have a material impact on pricing, and are not necessarily the way they've been drafted in the rules implemented, are not necessarily within the intent or spirit of the new market. And that also involves some issues around behavior, but also definitions and formulaic expression of both the FCAS and energy market prices and the application of uplifts. The current plan, because we've honed on those half a dozen issues now that have a material impact, the current plan is to actually roll this out, and the solutions we are currently contemplating with the industry in the last week of July. So maybe the third or the last week, we're trying to find out an exact date which is suitable for a TDOC meeting and a discussion with the industry. But clearly, we are, as the DRA has determined in the preliminary investigation, there are a number of factors that actually influence those prices, have material impact, and are inefficient, and they need to be fixed. I think that's from me, Martin.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for giving us that update, Dora. Okay, look, I'm happy to throw it open to the floor. If there's any further questions, you're quite welcome to drop it in the chat or come off mute and ask direct. I'm more than happy either way. So I'll just leave a couple of, a minute for anybody to pipe up. All right. Okay, it looks like we've covered everybody's questions. So, okay, well, finally, look, thank you very much to the presenters today and everybody who's come along to participate in the forum. We do have a survey post this forum, and we sort of really appreciate feedback and how we can make this, what material people would like to see, if they'd like us to change the format or any other sort of suggestions that we can do to make this more valuable for our market participants. Otherwise, here's some upcoming forums, and you're quite welcome. If you can put them on your calendar, reach out to us if you haven't received an invite and you want to go. So with that, I will close today's WACF, and I look forward to seeing you at our next forum.